Good afternoon to everyone in the US and good evening to our viewers in Europe. My name is General Jim Jones. I'm the Executive Chairman Emeritus of the Atlantic Council, as well as Chairman of our Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security and our Europe Center's 3Cs programming here at the Council. I'm delighted to welcome you to our next Central Europe Week panel discussion, Defending the West, US and Central European Defense Cooperation for a Stronger Transatlantic Alliance. We're here today because the Atlantic Council is committed to bolstering US Central European ties as we seek to strengthen the transatlantic relationship itself and as we address our greatest shared challenges. It's no question that our work comes at a crucial time for the US-European relationship. As the transatlantic community continues to face the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are also facing increasing threats to our shared security. These challenges are most apparent from the East. As we speak, an increasingly aggressive Russia has deployed tens of thousands of troops along the border with Ukraine in a disturbingly offensive posture. And Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko continues his regime's hybrid warfare against NATO and EU members through the fueling of illegal border crossings into Poland, Latvia, and Lithuania, and now Ukraine, in retaliation to EU sanctions. But this current moment represents certainly a challenge, but also some opportunities. And now is a time where our alliance can and must show leadership, solidarity, and resolve. It's also a moment to highlight the importance of our Central European allies and their crucial roles in standing up to the security threats that really do challenge the entire transatlantic alliance. And so to discuss today's and tomorrow's challenges to our security, we've assembled some of the best thinkers and leaders from both sides of the Atlantic during this year's Central Europe Week. To help highlight Central Europe's role in our collective defense, and I am delighted to welcome representatives from the defense ministries of the Czech Republic, Hungary, and the Slovak Republic, along with a US perspective from my good friend, former Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs, Ambassador Paula Dobriansky. Joining us from the Czech Republic is His Excellency Jan Havranich, who is a Deputy Minister for Defense Policy and Strategy for the Czech Republic. From Hungary, we're joined by Dr. Gergely Nemeth, Defense Policy Director and Deputy State Secretary in Hungary's Ministry of Defense. And from the Slovak Republic, we're joined by Martin Sklenar, who is Defense Policy Director in the Ministry of National Defense. And finally, we're joined also by, as I mentioned, Ambassador Paula Dobriansky, former US Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs, Senior Fellow at Harvard University Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, and Vice Chair of the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security here at the Atlantic Council. With that said, I'm very pleased to turn it over to Ian Brzezinski, a senior fellow here at the Council, and I might say someone who is very well steeped in the subject matter that we're about to discuss, and one of the driving forces here in the Atlantic Council when we talk about Central and Eastern Europe. So Ian, thank you for moderating this discussion, and over to you.
General Jones, thank you for that very generous introduction and setting the context of our conversation. And let me also welcome Ambassador Dobriansky, who plays, of course, an important leadership role here in the Council, Deputy Minister Havranich, State Secretary Nemeth, and Policy Director Sklenar. Welcome you all and appreciate your time and insights today. You know, General Jones mentioned the very precarious, the very disturbing buildup of Russian military forces along Ukraine's border and on occupied Ukrainian territory. This is the second very significant buildup we've seen this year by Russia. And actually, this fall's buildup builds on the previous buildup that remained in place after last spring. This is an offensive posture, and it is one that is deeply, deeply concerning, as it has a possibility of signaling a possible attack. So I want to turn actually to someone who's been a very long-term astute observer of the Soviet Union and of Russian policy and the Russian military, Dr. Dobryansky. Paula, what do you assess about Putin's intentions? What's motivating him? What are the objectives that are driving this second buildup this year along Ukraine's frontiers?
Well, first, thank you, Ian, for this forum, and congratulations to the Atlantic Council for the entire week of Central Europe, and also just delighted to be with our colleagues here today from the respective defense ministries. Just welcome to all of you. Let me respond to your question by first putting it in a geostrategic context. We are in a great power competition. And in that context, I do see that many of Russia's actions, and specifically Putin's actions, relate to the attempt to diminish US power and influence, whether be it globally and also certainly in the region of Europe. And secondly, it also is very targeted at trying to fragment our alliance and also our strong relationships with many partners in this region and also in other areas. But I also see this particular buildup as an attempt to test the Biden administration, to see if the Biden administration, what kind of action that it will take. Will it not just speak to the issue, but will it actually take a measure that, well, they would think twice about moving forward with. And then also I see this as a challenge to NATO. I think that Moscow and Putin is definitively here striving to challenge us and to test the waters to see how far they can get.
But Paula, is this just signaling and testing? Can we rule out the possibility this could actually be a precursor to another invasion of Ukraine?
We can absolutely not rule out that possibility. We have seen how Moscow has been a disruptor and has had aggressive behavior, not only in Europe, as we know, certainly in Crimea, of course, Donbass, and then no less in Georgia, Ossetia. I could go on and enumerate other kinds of aggressive behavior. So absolutely not. We cannot rule out any kind of possibility. And I think that we need to be prepared for what actions may ensue. And that's why I mentioned, I think that what undergirds this is some degree of testing. And I think the strength of our response will certainly matter in this case.
Mr. Havernock, this is the second time this is occurring in the last 6 months. What does this tell you about the West's response last spring? Is it sufficient? If we had a more robust military presence in Central and Eastern Europe, if not with Ukraine, could we possibly have avoided this situation?
Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and happy to be part of the Central European Week at the Atlantic Council. Ian, right to your question, I mean, hard to say. I think it's important that NATO has been building a strong defense and deterrence posture over the past couple of years. And we have been also closely working with Ukraine. But at the same time, we have to realize that even if these events are unfolding very close to our territory, they're still not unfolding at our territory. So there are certain limiting boundaries. But we really, and I agree with Paula on this, we really have to see this as a part of a long-term orchestrated campaign that is aiming at our coherence, at our cohesion, that is aiming to test our resilience, our decision-making, and overall, to see if our posture is strong. And for now, I think we are in a good place, but of course, our partners are at risk.
Martin, are you comfortable with the current NATO posture amidst this crisis? Should the alliance be doing more now? perhaps should we be moving some of our forces into Central Europe? This is something that would have happened. There would have been forced movements during the Cold War when the Soviet Union would make similarly aggressive moves as they did against Poland in 1980.
Well, thank you, Ian, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's a pleasure to speak on the Central European Week, and to start with the debate that is probably the most current one on the situation in Ukraine and well in the region to the east of our borders. Right to the point of your question, whether I'm comfortable. Yes, this is what NATO has been for us. This is what NATO needs to do. This is exactly what we are supposed to do. And Jan mentioned it. I mean, it's still Ukraine, even though it's very close, and you can understand that we share a border with Ukraine, so we follow the situation very, very closely. But this is where we need to be. We need to see our deterrence and defense posture is being built. I mean, we have our forces in places where we basically want to have them. We are working on our and also not only working but also demonstrating our mobility as an alliance to see to make sure that it's possible to see that we can move them if necessary. But a big thing right now for us would be patience to see. I mean, this is a new situation. I understand after the spring build-up at the Ukrainian border, we are in a different situation that we were for the period between 2014 and the spring. I mean, obviously, the time for an offensive step are much shorter, and we need to be more vigilant. But it's a game of patience right now, and we are not an alliance that provokes. We are there to be ready if anything happens, and let's not overdo our things. We are quite comfortable with where we are. We have the alliance in our back, and we're ready for anything that might happen.
Secretary Nemeth, Gergely, there's been some differences between Ukraine and Hungary, and Hungary has been actually holding up some cooperation, deeper cooperation between the alliance and Ukraine. Is now the time to lift those holds and allow that cooperation to move forward, to deepen the relationship as a part of the strategy to deter Russian aggression against your neighbor?
Well, thank you, Jan, and also on my behalf, thank you for being included into this conversation. This is a conversation about Central Europe and with Central Europeans, which is a really great signal for your willingness to communicate on these important strategic matters. So first of all, it goes without saying and should be still stated up front that Hungary stands firmly for the independence and sovereignty and territorial integrity as well of Ukraine, and support the non-recognition policy of EU and NATO regarding the illegal annexation of Crimea. It is also true, and I would concur with what has been said before, that it's true that the alliance is now developing its deterrence and defense posture. This is something which we have commenced already after the Crimean crisis, the illegal annexation, and this was the right thing to do. But deterrence should be first and foremost valid for allied countries, and it would need to support the core task, the collective defense core task. When it comes to Ukraine, first and foremost, I think that our endeavors towards Ukraine should remain in the auspices of cooperative security, but we are not without means here. This is important that Hungary also supported the enhanced operational partnership for Ukraine. We have other tools to support Ukraine in terms of military cooperation. Just to name one, right now, as Hungary is fulfilling the Visegrad presidency, very recently the V4 CHODs have also invited the Ukrainian CHOD, where they had a fantastic opportunity to talk about the recent developments in and around Ukraine. That being said, it is also important that while we support the Euro-Atlantic orientation of countries with such aspirations. It's also like in line with the Brussels summit communique, Ukraine is encouraged to show progress in many areas, including the right of minorities. For us Hungarians, protection of our minorities is of key importance. And currently, the law on state languages, the law on education, and the law on indigenous people are discriminative from our perspective against minorities. So we are still very strongly committed to maintaining dialogue to solve these issues. And this is very important that despite the seemingly deteriorating situation of the national minorities within Ukraine, Hungary continues to support Ukraine in terms of supporting its defense capacity building efforts. But I think that it also requires more discussion between Ukraine and Hungary, and also there is an element of solidarity which is required here from other allied countries. So once again, in the spirit of the Brussels communique, Ukraine is very strongly encouraged to show progress in it.
Georgi, I think we just lost you a little bit, but let me push you on a point here because I'm a little bit concerned about what you said. You're talking about the alliance limiting its engagement of Ukraine in this crisis to only collective security. Are you saying that Hungary will not support a more robust NATO engagement in the event of a Russian additional attack onto Ukrainian territory? Are you taking NATO action in support of Ukraine off the table?
Well, like others have also said, deterrence and defense is for improving collective defense. And in terms of cooperative security, we have really good tools at hand, including the enhanced operational partnership, which should be used at its fullest extent. So there is also more ways to cooperate. It's not a glass half empty, it's a glass half full, but there are issues which remain to be unsolved. And here there is further need for progress.
Let me turn to Dr. Dobrian, or go ahead, Jan.
Just wanted to jump in to say, we're not, there is not an invasion happening in Ukraine. And I think that's still very important because we are, as escalatory as the situation might appear, there are still open channels to communicate and to send the right messages that should such a situation happen, it would have serious consequences for Russia. And of course, I mean, the fact that Ukraine is not a member of NATO should not discount the gravity of the situation and the massive military buildup. So I think we should understand that quite clearly.
Dr. Dobriansky, is this the time to be taking anything off the table in terms of our possible response to Ukraine?
Thank you. I was just going to answer that question. I was just going to answer the question. I was putting a two finger up. My answer is no, it should not be taken off the table. So to give you a very precise answer to that, no, absolutely not, because Ukraine's security impacts Europe's security. So to make it gray or something not less clear in terms of our response matters, and that matters also in terms of its deterrence value. So a very clear answer to you is no, it should not be taken off the table.
Martin, you want to add anything on this position? You're right on the border with Ukraine.
Yes, as is Hungary for that matter. So we are. I'm very confident that Georgi is trying to make sure that we understand the national points. But my take would be that we will talk about such a situation once it happens, right? I mean, right now we are talking mostly about our collective defense. Of course, Ukraine is very much connected, and the situation in Ukraine is very much connected to the security of the alliance, of our national security. I have no problems signing that or making sure that we want to make sure that Ukraine stays stable Right now, the situation is as it is, and we should do our best to play a game that is currently going on, and we are not the ones who would be raising the stakes. I mean, this is not our way of doing things. Yes, we have a lot of possibilities open with Ukraine in terms of cooperation and our collective security, however we want to term it, and we want to use them very, very much. If we see the situation deteriorating, I'm sure that will be a different kind of discussion, and there might be changes in national positions as we see the situation developing, because this will be less about the it's going to be more, maybe less a bilateral situation and more an alliance type of situation. So I'm confident that if there would be anything, there would be a way of finding an allied response.
Thank you. I think it's very important that we take nothing off the table, because if we take anything off the table, that will likely increase Putin's confidence that he can get away with another offensive action. And that's the last thing that we want. This crisis is occurring at a time. Oh, go ahead, Paula.
I'm sorry. I put my little raised hand up. I hope you could see it. Forgive me. I just wanted to add, because I think there's an important balance here, and I'm hearing in our colleagues address this. I don't think anything should be taken off the table. I don't think any of us wants to see a kind of escalation and taking actions that will contribute to an escalation. But exactly at the same time, I have to also add, you don't want to take no action, so you also send a signal which opens the door. And that's why nothing should be off the table. I think the deterrent value here really matters greatly. And also, in this case, as I already underscored, what happens there does affect also the rest of Europe. I think when we look back at the invasion that took place into the Donbass, and then also the illegal annexation of Crimea, I think that many were really, caught off guard. We should not be caught off guard in this circumstance.
Thank you. This crisis is occurring in a context when the alliance has launched a rethink, a redo, an update of its strategic concept. A cornerstone document that articulates the alliance's threat environment, tailors its purpose to that environment, and lays out the fundamental tasks it must take to secure allied interests in that environment. How would you like this document to be updated? What are the core threats that NATO should be addressing today, and what tasks would you like to see emphasized? Let me turn to Martin first.
Well, as we talk about this, obviously there are this is a situation that points to the fact that the alliance has to be first and foremost ready for collective defense. This is obviously the most important role that NATO plays and can play. This is why Slovakia joined NATO. I mean, you cannot get this anywhere else right now. This is the best alternative for our security. And we want to make sure that all the countries basically work towards that end. So we want to make sure that it's also the strategic concept that highlights this important piece. There is a small twist, I would say, to collective defense, and that's resilience. We are no longer in an era where deterrence is enough for your security. So we need to make sure that you can deal with the attacks that do happen despite your deterrence, and there are several types of those. So we need to find a good way of describing how NATO can help nations, member states, increase their resilience on a national level. And I hope this will be also very an important part of the strategic concept. But NATO is not just collective defense. I mean, there's a lot of good work that NATO can do in the world. The crisis management needs to continue, crisis response, whatever we call it. But there is a strong market for such engagement. Discontinuing this in NATO would not be a wise thing to do, even after Afghanistan. But This is for me, even though it doesn't sound like collective defense, building stability and security abroad or overseas is also an important piece of building stability for your own countries. The same goes for building partnerships. So the three core tasks, as we know them in NATO, will, from our point of view, will need to remain as they are, with the addition of resilience. What I think is a big opportunity, Ian, for the current work on the NATO strategic concept is the fact that there is a similar process going also in the EU. And with the strategic compass, they even sound similar. I mean, this is like the best opportunity to work on this. From our point of view, there is an opportunity to do a step change in the relationship, not just incremental changes, but find the courage to define the relationship as we see it for the next period. And I'm happy to continue on that, but I'll also leave the floor for others to join in. I'm sure we're in agreement there.
Jan, you're a NATO hand. You served over there. You're probably aware that when you look back at the strategic concepts of the past and you see them evolve, you know, in the early days, it was very much focused on warfighting, kind of what NATO does, throwing lead down range. And over time, particularly after the end of the Cold War, it's become a broader smorgasbord of activities. You know, there are important activities that are elements of resilience, cybersecurity, information operations. Would you like to see the alliance's next strategic concept actually kind of refocus on the warfighting tasks, warfighting objectives it needs to meet? A more focused document, a document that's, you know, really focused on throwing lead down range rather than a wide variety of activities that really don't fall into NATO's domain?
Well, you are correct, Ian, that the scope of the strategic concept has broadened after the Cold War, especially. And it was the first time that the concept was made public. So up until then, all of the warfighting documents, as you call them, were classified, and they still remain classified. And today, the concept serves two purposes. It's an internal document where we solidify our policies, including on those issues that Martin talked about. And deterrence and defense is an important issue, and we'd certainly like to see a very strong element in that document. But it's also an important public policy and public communication document, both for our friends and potential adversaries. So we need to keep that channel open for sure. And you know, when it comes to addressing all of the challenges, I mean, no longer we're facing one kind of threat. In fact, there are multiple challenges, both from state and non-state actors that manifest themselves across all domains. And NATO needs to take that into account into one holistic posture. You know, we call this a 360-degree approach, which is a clumsy term. The reality means that we need to be able to address and respond, if needed, to all of those challenges at the same time. So I'm expecting a strong focus on deterrence and defense, including the nuclear aspects, because we are, after all, a nuclear alliance. But we also need to take into account, you know, issues such as cyber, hybrid warfare, you know, new challenges, and of course, we should not be forgetting about the challenges coming from the southern flank, as we call it, or you know, be it counterterrorism and the issues emanating from the south. These are also very important. And by the way, the current crisis happening in Belarus illustrates how important it is and how complex and connected those threats and challenges are when you have a crisis that is being orchestrated in the Middle East, but manifests itself on the eastern flank. So this is we're hoping for this to be a very, very open and transparent document, but that doesn't say that NATO is not undertaking contingency planning. On the contrary, as you know, over the past 2 years, we have significantly revised and upgraded our military strategy, but these should remain classified also for the purpose of ambiguity and for the purpose of deterrence, but we are prepared.
Jerry, what is Hungary looking for out of the strategic concept? What are the one or two key objectives that are driving your role in shaping this document?
Now it's muted.
We can hear you.
So, yeah, okay, that's great. So first of all, with regard to the strategic concept, I would agree with what others have also said. There is an increasing complexity in our security environment, which is making not only the threats and challenges more complex and interconnected, but it also requires us to be more agile. If there is one or two key principles to be set on behalf of Hungary, and obviously this is still not the final stage of the conversation about all of it. We think that first we should preserve NATO's character and main focus as the Euro-Atlantic defense organization, and we should also reaffirm the importance of all of the three core tasks. I would once again agree with others as well that there are also the southern challenges. There is pervasive instability, which is affecting us as root causes for illegal migration, migratory waves, which we also see as weaponized on the Belarus border, and we stand in firm solidarity with our Polish colleagues. But also terrorism, also increasing instability in and around Europe is of a key challenge. When it comes to regional focuses, we will continue to argue for the importance of supporting the Western Balkans, to also maintaining the credible perspective of a Euro-Atlantic integration. But the Western Balkans is not a burning house. It's a region which requires assistance from us, and Hungary is very much willing to act as a positive provider of security and assistance in this region as well. But when it comes to the, once again, turning back to the increasing complexity, emerging security challenges will play a greater role, so they should receive greater emphasis in the updated strategic concept. We can talk about cyber, hybrid, disruptive technologies. And when it comes to the importance of maintaining the technological edge, I think that emerging and disruptive technologies like the artificial intelligence are really changing the environment around us. We think that these are offering unprecedented opportunity to strengthen our edge, but they can also potentially escalate the speed of the developments and increase the complexity of the threats we can potentially face. So what is really reassuring that allied countries are deliberating all these challenges together, and that we will come out with a set of solutions in a consensual way, and then we will accordingly be able to decide for a consensual and common direction of travel, how the alliance is preparing for the future. And one more thing, which was already mentioned by Martin, but it's important to come back to it. Strategic concept is not happening in a vacuum. There is an important parallel in the form of the strategy compass. So the two documents should be developed in being cognizant of each other, and also should inform each other. And that would also add more impetus to the so important NATO-EU cooperation in that regard. Thank you.
Let me move on to two important debates that will probably shape the strategic concept, part of the broader process of updating this document. President Biden and his administration are now in the midst of a nuclear posture review. That review will update U.S. nuclear weapons doctrine and the U.S. nuclear weapons posture. To date, U.S. nuclear weapons doctrine has been ambiguous about how and when Washington would use nuclear weapons against an adversary, making it a possibility such weapons could be employed even if an adversary is using only conventional forces in an aggression. During last year's presidential campaign, President Biden wrote in Foreign Affairs, and I'm quoting, "I believe, quote, I believe the sole purpose of the U.S. nuclear arsenal should be deterring, and if necessary, retaliating against a nuclear attack. And as president, I will work to put that belief into practice." If President Biden changes U.S. nuclear doctrine in this way toward one in which nuclear weapons are to only deter nuclear war, how would that affect the alliance's deterrent posture against old threats like Russia and possibly new threats from elsewhere around the world? Dr. Dobriansky?
I think that here it brings out certain kinds of ambiguities. And when you have ambiguities, that also means potential for misinterpretation and miscalculation. So that would be I would say, my biggest concern in this case. By such a modification, again, I think that opens the door in multiple ways that could be well misinterpreted, and also could put us in a situation where there isn't any kind of tragically deterrent value. Comments have been made about how it's important in the strategic concept to have deterrence and to have a strong warfighting and nuclear deterrence. So I think any downgrading of the definition, if you will, or narrowing of the definition also will result in not providing us the greatest fortification and greatest deterrent value in this case. That would be my view.
Mr. Havernack?
The short comment is I agree with Paula. Let me expand on that. Of course, it's a sovereign right by the United States administration and President Biden to decide on the nuclear posture. But at the same time, as I said earlier, the US nuclear umbrella is part of NATO's nuclear umbrella. And that's why it matters to us, allies in Europe as well. So we appreciate the administration has been actually in consultation with us on what we think the future posture could look like. And we've said it repeatedly that the sole purpose or no first use policy would be rather harmful, to NATO's nuclear deterrence and overall nuclear posture, because it's exactly the ambiguity that prevents the miscalculation, misinterpretation, but I would also say mischief. We don't want to give an open invitation to various both state and non-state actors to embark upon adventurous behavior from which there would be no return. So we really appreciate we have our say or advice. We can share our advice and ideas in that process. But really, we should be really conservative when it comes to that, because this is what makes our deterrence posture strong. And it's important we keep that ambiguity in the posture.
Gregory or Martin, would you like to add into this?
Yes, thanks. And well, the short answer is yes. The nuclear deterrent is crucial for NATO deterrence, the U.S. nuclear deterrent, and we obviously work and consult with the U.S. while they do their review. From our point of view, it makes sense to keep the nuclear deterrent untouched as it was, including the declaratory policy, obviously. In the declaratory policy with nuclear weapons, it's tricky business, right? You don't want to leave too much ambiguity, but you still want to leave ambiguity. What is the policy? So you don't want to make a strong line that this is what we do, and so that the calculations of possible opponents are easier. I mean, this is the most important part of that. We want to make sure that it does the deterrent role that it's supposed to do. We're happy to consult as necessary with the U.S.
Gergely, Dr. Nemeth?
Yes, thank you. Well, not much to add because basically we are in agreement with what has been said by Martin and Jan. I would only point out the importance of the continued regular dialogue in this regard, since this is a key issue which is clearly affecting the overall security of the Euro-Atlantic region and us European allies. So that would be all from my part.
You know, we have some questions coming in from the audience, and just underscore that those who want to ask questions should do so via the dedicated question box at the Atlantic Council's 2021 Central Europe Week page, or through the commentary box on YouTube or Twitter if you're following on that way. Before I turn to those questions, let me raise one issue that will also be part of the evolution of the strategic concept, and that is growing transatlantic concern about increasing Chinese assertiveness as a rising global power. The European Commission defines China's strategic competitor. NATO summit documents have identified challenges posed by China. So what should be the alliance's posture in the Indo-Pacific, and how should the Indo-Pacific and China be addressed in the next strategic concept? Should I start with Jan?
Sure. I mean, obviously there are limitations in the Washington Treaty as to the geographical scope of alliances missions. But at the same time, the challenges posed by China manifest themselves via cyberspace, in the financial sector, through investments in critical infrastructure, etc. So they can manifest themselves, of course, in the Euro-Atlantic area, and they do. So when the strongest ally, the United States, comes to the table at Brussels headquarters of NATO and says that China is a problem for the US, I think we legitimately need to deal with the issue. And that does not mean we should be deploying NATO troops in the Indo-Pacific regions, in the Indo-Pacific region, but it really means that we should be looking at the potential implications of China's assertiveness and rise onto our security and into our defense, and see whether NATO has tools to respond and to prepare for further potential challenges. But I'd say consultation and exchange of information and exchange of intelligence is the minimum that we need to be doing when it comes to China. Does NATO need to act? Not necessarily. What if something were to happen between the United States and China? What kind of implications it would have for the alliance? I think that's a question that we need to be addressing as we are drafting the strategic concept. But it's a very vivid question, and there are lots of discussions happening at NATO actually on this very topic. And as you, Ian, rightly said, the EU has a more diversified approach to China. It labels it as a strategic competitor as well as an economic partner. So that sort of shows you the diversity of opinions that exists also within the alliance. But I'm expecting the strategic concept and even the Madrid summit communique to address the challenge of China as well.
But Dr. Dobriansky, I mean, I actually disagree with the assertion that there are geographic bounds on NATO's operations, because NATO's actually been engaged in Afghanistan, off the coast of Africa, and elsewhere around the world, and has global partnerships that are truly global. But from, sitting in Washington, D.C., Paula, where do you see NATO fitting into a transatlantic strategy for China?
Well, I see it fitting in very centrally. And I'll start with this. I was very struck by the fact that Jens Stoltenberg not only has made these assertions in Europe, but he did come to the United States on a recent visit. And the focus of his visit, in fact, was the importance of our collaboration and active engagement relative to the rise of China. And he took it upon himself not just to focus on the military challenges, because here we know that all of our countries have been impacted by, if you will, the political dimension, the economic dimension in terms of supply chain. And by the way, supply chain also has military and national security ramifications, as we know. The military component, which doesn't only, necessarily mean the placement of troops, but then, going into also the technological. Before, when you asked the question, Ian, about the strategic concept, I think all of my colleagues here, in one way or another, had referred to the importance of cyber and these new forms of warfare. Well, in dealing with China, China has been heavily engaged in deploying and using and weaponizing technologies, certainly in terms of cyber and also in other ways and means. So from that standpoint, I see it as being very integrated. I see that as being very germane. And most significantly, I see that the Secretary General himself has highlighted this as a key area that NATO needs to be engaged in and involved in. And let me add one last footnote to it. When you look at the Indo-Pacific and what's been going on there, you have the quadrilateral security dialogue, of which Japan, Australia, the US, and India are part of. And it seems to me that there has to be the kind of collaboration that surrounds and undergirds the common goal. And the common goal is to form a very strong deterrent to the kinds of, and not just only deterrent, but even beyond deterrent, of stemming the kind of aggressive actions that we have been seeing from China in all of these different sectors.
Let me take a question from the audience here. This one's from Victor Rudd of the Ukrainian American Bar Association. What has to happen for the West to get to the point of abandoning an exclusive response, react mentality, always being on the defensive, to say, and undertake measures calculated to turn Putin inward? He seems to be advocating, if I could take Victor's words a bit further, to actually, instead of being only defensive, but actually getting on the offense to kind of disrupt, a strategy of disruption, to cause Putin to actually focus a little bit more inward and less outward against his neighbors. Martin?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. This is actually, I think, the main argument or the basis of the situation. This is, if let's try and read Mr. Putin's mind, what he thinks when he decides on these things. At least what he keeps telling is that the West is after Russia. Everybody wants to either contain Russia or push them back. This is what is the narrative that helps him, obviously, staying in power, which is completely false, and it doesn't reflect the reality. And we would be very careful to do actions that would support this kind of narrative. I mean, we are not an offensive alliance. We do not do offensive operations. We are ready. We are strong. We are the strongest alliance in the world. We are ready for anything that could happen. We are sure that we will not lose any kind of such competition. So we don't need to be this kind of active towards Russia. This is not, for me, this is not something that should be seen as a disadvantage or something negative. I mean, this is a very, very positive thing. I mean, this is something that has that builds our credibility and our strength, our moral strength, and gives us an advantage in this. And Mr. Putin will probably think twice whether he's going to be the one who strikes first or not. I mean, if his narrative is built on being contained or attacked, if he's the one shooting first, then he's lost all his credibility. I mean, he's lost probably a lot of that in the West, but he might lose that also with the constituency that he needs back home.
We have actually two questions came in from the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. They're long questions, but I think I'm going to summarize them succinctly in this way. What are the prospects of the INF Treaty being revived in Europe? Do any of you see that as a likely prospect in the near to medium term? Gregory?
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Well, it's very difficult. It's a $64,000 question, but as for Hungary, which is a country which is not developing any offensive weapon systems, we are clearly interested in maintaining and upholding the current non-proliferation structures in that regard, and we remain supportive towards these efforts. So it would be really a bad outcome to see further deterioration of these non-proliferation regimes above Europe.
You know, last month, NATO defense ministers met. I imagine some of you were there. I know Paula wasn't there, but the gentleman here might have been. And they agreed to the next round of capability targets over the next 4 years. And one of the earliest forms of regional collaboration in Central Europe is the Visegrad 4. And the Visegrad 4 is going to be Visegrad Battalion. Can you share with us how the Visegrad 4 will be contributing to those capability targets, perhaps as a group of 4? And I think Hungary today actually kind of chairs the Visegrad 4 initiative. So maybe I'll turn to Gregory again. Gregory, again, see, where is the Visegrad 4 going in terms of their defense collaboration, and how are they contributing to these capability targets?
Well, thank you very much. So it's indeed true that Hungary is the current presidency of the Visegrad 4. We are celebrating the 30th anniversary of this regional format. And just a word on the capability target package. So it is indeed a very crucial part of further developing the deterrence and defense architecture. And it is clearly an expensive undertaking, by the way, because nations will or are already spending 2% of their GDP in favor of fulfilling those capability requirements. So there is a very strong national element of the whole picture, which is that we are now really transforming our armed forces with a view to create more contributions towards the alliance's security. So we have a strong first layer, which is national capabilities. But then it's a very good question on how to cooperate, how to make these capabilities more interoperable. And so when it comes to the Visegrad 4, the current presidency, but also the previous ones, are very much focused on creating more interoperability and also providing more contribution to the overall NATO defense planning procedure. One of the flagships is the V4 Joint Logistics Support Group, which is a regional logistical group which can prepare theater enablement for allied forces. But also in EU framework, there are V4 EU battle groups, which are standing formations for a predetermined period. And there are obviously discussions on how to do even more, and that would be to shoulder a common capability target within V4 framework. So this is a discussion which we currently having, but I'm sure that the objectives are shared by other Visegrad colleagues as well, but it's up to them to comment on that.
Jan, Martin, let me just be a little provocative. I see real value, potential value in the V4 battle group, but when is this going to be actually exercised? I'm not even confident that there has been ever an EU battle group that's ever been deployed. When do you see the first deployment of the V4 battle group? And is it time to deploy it now to Poland, for example, to demonstrate solidarity with Ukraine?
Jan, if you permit, I'm happy to take that. Ian, the most important thing about the V4 battle group is, for me, that it happens regularly. I mean, this is a force that is there at the disposal of the EU in a regular fashion, and this has been a tremendous success. I know that it doesn't seem like much when the EU is not deploying the battle groups, but still the V4 is able to provide a force that can be delivered if necessary, and the will is there. basically to the scenario, to fulfill a scenario that there are in the EU. And with that, with the preparation of the battle group, that has been rotational or rather regular. There comes a lot of exercising and a lot of preparation of the forces, a lot of communication, a lot of interaction and interoperability that comes with that, and that is critical, especially for countries on the eastern border, and that is a very big added value of the EU battle group, not just for the EU but for NATO as well. I mean, the guys know themselves from exactly these kind of exercises and I mean of the cooperation that they do while they're building the battle group. And I hope this will be also underscored then in future when we talk about Visegrad cooperation with the because you asked for what are the possibilities for Visegrad to work together to fulfill capability targets. Well, I think it will come naturally. I mean, all of our countries are amidst a modernization that is unprecedented in the history. That this is certainly the case for us, and with that, we will inevitably buy a lot of new equipment, and there is a good chance that the equipment will be coming from the same producers in many of the 4 countries in Visegrad, and I think that will create another possibility for having a deeper cooperation, not just the operational, but also very close, basically on equipment level. That is there for the V4 to use in the future.
All right, we're in our last 3 minutes, so I'm going to throw out one last question, and I'd be very interested in getting your reactions to it, your responses to it. And I'm going to go first with the 3 state secretaries, ministers from Central Europe, and then close with Dr. Dobriansky. United States the Biden administration is in the midst of several reviews. A national security strategy has to be promulgated, a national defense strategy, national military strategy, and then a number of other reviews, including a global posture review, which will, of course, shape and affect the U.S. military presence in Europe, including the Central and Eastern Europe. I'd be interested in what are your expectations from that global posture review when it comes down to the Euro-Atlantic relationship. And I'll start with Jan.
High hopes. No, of course, we're watching the review processes with interest, and we're happy to be consulting with the US government. And we're not expecting any radical changes when it comes to the Euro-Atlantic partnership. I mean, no matter what the administration and how manifested, the relationship has been in the public, there has been over the past decade a very strong US military presence in Europe. And we're hoping this will not change, and it should not change given all the security challenges we have just talked about. So we're expecting strong focus on the Euro-Atlantic cooperation, on NATO as an alliance, as well as on NATO-EU cooperation, US-EU defense dialogue, and looking at tools to address the challenges that we share, be it in the conventional domain or in the non-conventional domain, and in the area of emerging security challenges, or the challenges that have already emerged as hybrid or cyber. And of course, we need to be working side by side on keeping the technological edge that our colleagues have talked about.
Dr. Nemeth.
Yes, I think 2 important questions should be raised here. First, how will this review affect the security of Europe? And secondly, how will this review affect transatlantic relations in the long run? The bottom line here is that reducing the number of US troops in Europe would send an unfortunate message. Deterring war should be the primarily goal for force posture planning. We also see that the Middle East should not be neglected or sidelined. So there is still a need to manage, if I may say so, pervasive instability as also the source of mass migration, but also the source of instability. And obviously there is the below threshold competition on which we expect some new ideas from the administration. So I think that this set of postures should take in one hand the challenges from both emanating from the East and the South, and also send the right messages for European allies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Secretary Sklenar.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues as they described it. Let me add maybe another aspect of the posture, and I agree with the statements that decreasing the number of US troops in Europe would not be a message to be sent right now. What I think would be good to have in the posture debate is a debate on mobility, on the military mobility. In Europe of US forces. It adds quite a lot of interoperability and impetus to the efforts that we are doing also nationally. Then the mobility also across the Atlantic. That's an important part of that discussion. But let me add also a point on the political presence of the US. It's not just the military presence. I mean, we have if you look at the polls in Slovakia. Many people do not believe that the allies will actually show up if something really happens. And I think it's not that the military would be moving not too much across Slovakia. That's another part of the strategic communication challenge that we have. But it seems that the political presence is a little missing, and we would be looking to have that a little bit more also in Central Europe.
Dr. Dobriansky, Paula, you have the last word. And this is an important review in light of the current circumstances.
Absolutely. Well, I'll say it very succinctly. I think they said it all. I think that in terms of the US presence and the sensitivity to the US position, I don't think that should be undermined in this case for all the reasons each and every one of them had already stated.
Thank you. Dr. Dobriansky, Minister Havernak, State Secretary Nemeth, Director Sklenar, thank you for your time this afternoon. We had a great discussion on the situation confronting Ukraine, the strategic concept in different dimensions of it, including the nuclear dimension and geographic dimensions, an update on where we are in V4 collaboration, and some expressions of ambition for the next US Global Posture Review. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll all come back to the Atlantic Council.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.